actually have a doll here right now. I have a little doll.
Yay! I want to see.
Her name's Starwolf.
Woo!
Like the Star Fox character, apparently.
Oh my god, really? Wait, did they branched out like that?
They named her Starwolf. No, she's not a Star Fox character.
Oh, okay.
But her name is... I got Starwolf. Woo. Oh no, her hat. If you've been listening to One Control Port podcast for a long time, you'll know that I previously talked to Princess Poki, although at the time her name was Poki Puff, and she's a YouTuber who makes content around games for girls and has been doing so for quite a while now. And in our last conversation, I don't even 100% remember exactly what we talked about on that podcast, but I remember very distinctly after we finished recording, she started talking a little bit about the Bratz game specifically, and it made me realize that, you know, these kind of licensed doll games like Bratz, like Barbies, and to some extent like Monster High and things like that, these are games that I didn't really give like the time of day to, not necessarily because I wasn't willing to accept them. Just growing up, I kind of looked at them as licensed games that weren't really worth looking at growing up and things like that. So this podcast is me kind of following up on that conversation and wanting to talk to her about Bratz and Barbie and what makes up these games and their appeal. And so we kind of go through the flexibility of Barbie and the rigidness of something like Bratz as well. Although I did decide to leave in kind of the beginning section of our conversation where we talked a little bit about cozy games kind of overtaking games for girls, since I think that's a really interesting topic. And then also we kind of navigate a little bit of the style savvy fashion dreamer genre, if you're tuned into that, where the fashion dreamer game from the style savvy developers came out and disappointed a lot of people. So I wanted to kind of get her thoughts on that and understand, you know, kind of where she stood with that stuff.
One thing that has grown a lot is like cozy games, and I'm like, I've seen like that overlap, but also like not really, but like that's kind of, but my content, I just try to be relatively the same, but like that sector kind of blew up, which is like parallel but not really. I don't know.
Okay. so there, I guess there's this distinction there because like one thing I'm pretty sure I mentioned this to you last time, I don't really like the term games for girls very much, just because it is like very specific and it's very confusing to people who don't know what it is, because I'll be like, I like games for girls, and they'll be like, what do you mean by that? And it's like, okay, I have to explain to you what this means. But it sounds like cozy games is actually a separate thing now, that like, and that makes sense, but that's what you're saying, right? Is like cozy games are kind of its own separate thing. So
yeah, like it's weird because like whenever and I see people have like debates about it all the time, so it's like it's so interesting. But like a lot of people, when it first started, it was mainly like farming games. Like those were the cozy games.
Yeah.
Like I mean, it really boomed after like Animal Crossing New Horizons. Like that's really when I saw it take off. It was like after that game, because that was considered like the epic cozy game. Like it had everything.
Yeah,
it had like kind of like the farming and stuff, like, well, not in the beginning, towards the later end, but then like Stardew, it was kind of like that with Stardew, but not really. But Stardew took off, like, I guess after kind of Animal Crossing 2. So it's like, but now when like people talk about cozy games, it's like puzzle games, like unpacking, just like the super low stake, casual chill game, if that makes sense. Like it's changed, it keeps changing.
Unpacking is that game where I think you're moving into an apartment or something like that, right? And I'm guessing, is it multiple different apartments, or like how does that?
It's like multiple spaces. Like it's not just like you're not a character. You're just unpacking a bunch of random people's stuff.
Gotcha. And is there like an objective, or you just unpack the room and hey, whatever the room looks like at the end, congratulations? Or is there like a scoring or anything like that?
Yeah, no score, just like unpack. Like, and I think that's the other thing. Like a lot of these cozy games don't have like an end goal. There's no like score. You're not keeping track of anything. Like it's just like, you did it. You did the thing. Here's a ribbon because you did the thing. I guess, which isn't a bad thing. I'm like, that's not like, I wouldn't say that's not like a negative. Like it's nice to have like some games just be like, you did the thing, because like life is already hard enough. You did the thing, yay.
Yeah, like you mentioned that, and it's like, I guess like what to me, like explaining that, what would define a cozy game to some extent would be a de-stressing element. Would that be accurate? Like, okay. And it doesn't necessarily mean there can't be objectives, but whatever that objective should be, shouldn't be stressful.
Right. And
Is
even
that
if it
right?
is,
Yeah.
like, I think a lot of people, like, if people have given it a lot more leeway, like, you know, the
Mhm.
craziest thing that I've seen, because, like, cozy games has evolved so much, like, some people have started to try to throw in, like, horror games and be like, these are cozy. And I'm just like, is this cozy? Like,
Yeah, I mean,
seriously?
putting walls on genres is a whole other thing, right? Like
Yes.
you can only do so much, and at the end of the day, however people interpret it, it's how they're going to interpret it. So, you know, I
Exactly.
think unless it's like outright wrong, it's hard to really put too many walls, right? But I think to me that sounds like accurate. Like a de-stress would be the right thing, and a horror game does not sound like something where I would want to de-stress.
No,
But
not
I don't know.
really.
I guess the question of that would be like, is horror
Sorry,
inherently
please excuse my
stressful?
cat.
It's fine. My cat's sitting here. I right before we got on the show, I almost forgot to feed him. Like, I'm thankful I remembered, because like 30 minutes in, we'd be talking and he'd be like, meow, 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 meow. So, but
Unfortunately, food
he's
won't quell that. She just is
oh
there.
yeah. Mine is just like all the time food. I want food. I love him though. He's a cutie. He's a little baby tuxedo cat. So,
Oh,
but
they're so
he's
cute.
usually pretty good about, like, if I'm talking, he will leave me alone, which is interesting. Works out for me as somebody who records YouTube stuff. But,
Yes, I mean, hey, that's always the challenge.
so I guess so cozy games is, where do you think like the overlap is between like cozy games and games for girls then, for that?
I think honestly I feel like they're so similar. I feel like a lot of people just like I feel like girl games for girls just kind of like died off, and then like cozy games just became this like meme, like a trend
Mm.
almost. So like I think that those games, when they do come out, they are just automatically put into that category. Like I feel like Bratz, like I don't, either that or they just kind of stand by themselves, like in the media perspective. Like when Bratz came out, like that wasn't a cozy game, that wasn't a girly game. It was just like, oh my god, Bratz has a game. Like that was just like that's literally, it was just like Bratz has a game, and like the girls are like going ham. That's really like, I don't think the games for girls, like I feel like it's not talked about as like on the same level. So like when these games
Mm.
come out, like they just usually are automatically either regulated to being its own thing or a cozy game. That's pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
That's why I want to keep the games for girls category alive, because like I love that. I love that. I like these
Yeah.
genuinely kind of girly games. Like I feel like they don't get as much recognition as like, you know, some of these other like titles, you know?
So in some ways, you feel like cozy games have basically have done games for girls dirty to some
Yeah,
extent.
pretty much. I think so, in my humble opinion.
Interesting. So what would be like a more modern games for girl now? Because, like, let's say in the last year, is there anything you can think of, or?
Like I was working on a list of like a couple
Mhm.
different lists. There's this game called Camper Van, which basically you have a camper van and you have like all these like items that it's like unpacking, but like super girly aesthetic, I guess. Like it's really cute.
There's like Disney.
Oh,
Is it
Disney Dreamlight
Disney?
Valley.
Yeah. Is,
Yeah.
is that still running? Is that still good? And is it popular? Or?
It's still popular. It's still running. My problem with them is like, and I did a review for that game on TikTok. I liked the
Mm-hmm.
idea of it, but it's too money grabby for me. Like all they do is like, I don't know, like Sims is like one thing I reference when I like talk about games
Yeah.
like that. It's just like they release their like packs, and like their outfits and their characters are locked behind paywalls. Like
Mm-hmm.
literally, I was on their Twitter the other day, and they released this Daisy boutique, which is like the character Daisy, and I love Daisy. She is a girl. She's that girl.
I'm
But
sorry,
you
I don't
had
know anything about Disney. Who's Daisy?
Donald Duck's like girlfriend.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry.
One of my favorite games well, maybe not favorite. I really liked Disney Enchanted Journey on the Wii specifically, and it's just like
Oh yeah,
I
I
don't
heard
know
about that one.
anything about Disney, but this game's all right. So
This game's great. I don't know
yeah,
about any of you guys, but this game's great.
yeah. This looks fun. This is cute, and like weirdly enough, the game I was like thinking about while playing it was Near, if anything, which is like weird. But
Oh,
anyways,
that's fair.
is that cozy or games for girl?
I would say that's one of the things. I think it's both. I think it's
Okay, so
like
both.
yeah, it's definitely a both. Like cozy elements, like it has farming, which like most of the titles that I think of for games for girls don't really have farming. So there's farming, and there's like oh my gosh, there's like fishing, and I would say it's like one of the traditional, like it
Yeah.
leans cozy, but there is a lot of like fashion elements. Like they added the Daisy's boutique where you can design your own clothes, and they have like different, a lot of the Disney characters that they bring in, like the Disney princesses, are leaning more towards the games for girls side. So like I would say it's like
Yeah,
split
yeah,
down
yeah.
the middle. It's like it could go either way.
I really like the idea that like we finally defined like cozy games in the last like 5 years, and that's like the genre Animal Crossing has been all along, just nobody knew.
Yes. Like, literally, I think like Animal Crossing paved its way for a lot of games. It's actually kind of ridiculous how many games like took from Animal Crossing. Like, oh, one of the games, actually there's two games. Now my brain's going, and I'm like, now all these games are like coming to my head. But Princess, I think it was like Princess Party, or gosh,
Yeah, Princess
what is
Party.
that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we talked about that one. So they came out with a sequel, and it was Pretty Princess Garden Party. Now that one was literally Animal Crossing meets princesses. Like the shape of the island was the same. Like it had like the farming elements, but it had this like really, really robust like outfit system that carried on from the original game.
Man.
So like that, oh my god, that game I played for hours. It's so fun. Like I
Presenting it as an Animal Crossing clone versus a Stardew Valley clone like makes it more appealing to me in a lot of ways. I don't know why, but
no,
I've never been like super into farming games, but I had the traumatic experience of playing Harvest Moon: A Wonderful Life. Wonderful game in a lot of ways, but it also was like months. It felt like months of my life trying to beat that game.
I'm a huge Harvest Moon fan. Like I have played like pretty much almost every single Harvest Moon game that was released, and I would say A Wonderful Life, they rebooted it for the system as let's see. So they had A Wonderful Life, they had Another Wonderful Life with a female protagonist, and then they rebooted another A Wonderful Life on the Switch, but under the Story of Seasons umbrella, not the Harvest Moon umbrella. I know it's very, very confusing, but it's like that game, looking back, had the least amount of things in a Harvest Moon title as opposed to like any of the other titles. So I feel really bad for anybody who isn't like versed in the world and the games to like get that one and be their first one. I'm like, no, there are so many better ones.
I will say the one thing I if you want to like talk about devoid of content and what that could do for a game, it made me appreciate the passage of time a little bit better. And because that game has, I don't know about other Harvest Moon games, but that game I felt like there's kind of not a lot to do. So a lot of it was watching the town and watching kind of who comes and goes, whether they passed away or moved or all that stuff. And I thought it did a good job of capturing that personally. That might be true of all Harvest Moons, but that one specific, I can at least say that. So
no, that would be actually, that's a really positive way of saying that. Thank you. Because like all the other ones, you're not really like paying attention to like who, I mean, you do have relationships with people in the town, but this one, it's like, all right, Sue got up today. She's okay. Great. Sue died. No. Oh no. Now I gotta clean her gravesite every day for her husband. Like, and none of the Harvest Moon games like can capture that, like, this is a town and these are the things that happen.
Yeah. In the last 3 years, like what would you say has like surprised you the most out of like any development in cozy games or games for girls? If it's a specific game or if there's like a change in direction or not all or any trends? Anything like that?
So like biggest surprise, so like with Style Savvy that we talked about, so that studio actually came out with a sequel and it came on the Switch called Fashion Dreamer.
You are coming in. This is a question I have for you.
Yes.
All right. So before we get anything in deeper into this, I need to know, it's 2024. What is your political stance? Fashion Dreamer, more like Style Savvy, or is it better as its own thing?
See, that game really disappointed
all
me.
I saw was, this isn't Style Savvy, cry, cry, cry. And I was like, that's fine, I get it. But also, it didn't look like this game was trying to be Style Savvy to me, so...
Oh my gosh, the uproar when that game came out was so funny to me because I was like, I don't know if I want a sequel to Style Savvy. Like, that would be cool, but like maybe let's let it be its own thing. And man, did it disappoint being its own thing and being a friend and after coming after Style Savvy.
Okay, that
Like,
everyone I've
it did
presented this
both.
topic to, they have said if they had said they don't want it to be like Style Savvy, they still say, man, it was still a disappointment though.
Oh, it was bad. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
It's weird because like I just finished it yesterday. Funnily enough, like
Mhm.
or finished it. Like credits rolled, but there was like a new world that opened up. So I was like, so is it finished or no? But it's just like
Yeah.
the thing with having fashion games. It's a hard balance of like, are you going to really engage with these characters, interact with these characters? How's the world building? Like, is it realistic? Like, are there enough outfits? There's the thing. Fashion Dreamer, I will say, has the like most amount of clothes I've ever seen in a game. Like the amount of clothes in this game is like ridiculous. Like it was like I'm still discovering games or still discovering like clothes like hours and hours and hours into the game. They did great with that. Everything else was like not good. Like the avatars were weird. They like there was one guy, I kid you not, he would just stand there and just do this and like he just kept doing it and I was just like, is he okay? Like is he gonna stop? So like the world building itself was not very good because because the characters were so one-dimensional. Like I wish they had like the amount of character that they had in Style Savvy. And I think that Style Savvy really focused on the relationships of the characters in the world. Even if they just took that and not like, oh, we're having a fashion show one day or we're doing like all these other things that Style Savvy did. But if they just took the relationship and the interest of the actual characters themselves, that would have made the game way better. But again, you got these super generic characters that were so awkward to like, do I want to style this person that I actually don't want to talk to at all because he seems like a psychopath? Like, I think that was really getting me. I'm not even gonna lie, that was really getting me. And the worlds themselves were pretty small.
I'm kind of curious because you mentioned with Style Savvy specifically, like that character interactions was important to you. And I've only ever played Trendsetters, just for context there. But when I saw people talk about Style Savvy, and keep in mind this was back when the game came out, when I was really reading other people's impressions, so early 2010, something like that. And very male focused review sites and things like that. Everyone was just like, "Oh, this is a business sim." And so when people were complaining about Style Savvy, this game not be like Style Savvy, I think my impression was people wanted a business sim kind of thing. Do you think that is like I could be wrong in this. I feel like that might be like the more inherently male commentary I've seen about this game versus maybe the character interaction stuff. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, no, because it's like they're not wrong. Style Savvy was a business sim. Like you had your boutique, you could make your boutique look a certain way, you could interact with these characters within your business and like style them up and things like that. They are totally not wrong in that. With Fashion Dreamer, it's not a business sim. It's like it's an influencer sim. Like you are basically dressing up these people so they can follow you, and then you get points to unlock more things. But like weirdly enough, you weren't like you were technically an influencer, but like you never really saw your influence outside of like
numbers.
Maybe it's like numbers. Like even if you were really really bad at the outfits and like completely ignored everything that they wanted, like you're still gonna grow. So like it was like if there was like a negative aspect to it, that would be interesting. But like I mean, it was a very like hollow idea. Like if it was like, oh, you're walking down the street and you became like a really famous influencer, people like ran up to you and they're like, oh my gosh, like I want you to style my outfits, or oh my gosh, I want you. If it focused on the like the outfits that you created more, like or any avenue of being an influencer, I think the game would have been a lot more like would have had a lot more to it. Like you had a showroom, so technically you did have a showroom, kind of like Style Savvy, but like I'm not even gonna hold you. To be able to unlock the things in the showroom, you would have to be level 45. I was playing that game like pretty consistently since it came out. I'm only at level like 13. And I'm like, there's no way. Like, I do not foresee myself ever being able to unlock any of these items, like, ever. Like, I can't imagine anybody who has any of this stuff unlocked.
I think that's really interesting what you said earlier about, like, so top level, let's, like, bring this back a little bit. Top level, this is a game about being a influencer at the end of the day. And I think to some degree, I've respected it for that, right? It's like, okay, I don't know anything about this, but there's a fashion influencer culture on platforms like TikTok, Instagram, things like that, right? I assume it exists. I assume it's massive. I assume I just don't know anyone who is engaged with that. I think when you first messaged me, like the first one, you're like, can you message me on Instagram? I'm like, oh God, let me see if I can find my login for Instagram. I don't even know the last time I logged into Instagram. But you know, when you think about social media and stuff, a lot of it's like very hollow in the sense of like, oh, how many likes you get, how many retweets you get, and things like that. And it sounds like in some ways this game replicates that when you are focused on those as like your key metric of what it means to be like a influencer on social media versus, you know, the interactions that people have with you in that regard, right? Like I've done YouTube, right? And so sometimes if I get a video that comes out that doesn't have enough views, or not enough views, but, you know, gets low views, it's like, oh, dang it. But then also you think about it, it's like 700 people listen to this potentially, right? That's a lot of people who listen to me like vomit about, like, you know, Monster High or something like that, right? So, you know, so I think that's really interesting that like it failed to capture almost the human element. Does that make sense?
No, that totally, like, literally, I think you captured that, because, like, for me, like, I do fashion posts, like, on my TikTok and sometimes on my YouTube channel, but, like, I feel like, for me, I don't have the, like, I guess the resources to be able to become like a fashion influencer, because to be a fashion influencer, you literally, like, fashion works on I would say every other week there's like releases for clothes. So like you would have to have a lot of money to be able to keep up with the trends and everything to keep up with those fashion cycles. So, and I think the people that have hit that level are almost like caricatures in a sense of like, I'm just buying all this stuff. Here, look at the stuff that I have. This is cool. Like, and it's just like, okay, well, first of all, most of these people are never going to be able to like buy as much stuff as this. And they're just, I mean, they're looking to you for like fashion advice and things like that. But it depends on like the influencer. Some of them end up like their interactions tend to be a little bit more hollow. And don't even get me started on the girls who gatekeep. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen something on Twitter and I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool. Girl, where'd you get that? And I'm like, crickets. And I'm just like, where did she get it? Does anybody else know where this girl got this thing? Like, I don't even know if I want to take a picture and post about it. Like, I just think this thing is cool. Like, it's just like, there's so many layers to it. And I feel like Fashion Dreamer, you would be that influencer to post a pic of like a thing that you have and not tell anybody where you got it from. Like, I feel like Fashion Dreamer, it takes all the worst things about being an influencer and made it into a case.
There's probably like a really like, and I haven't like stuck around to see if anyone's made any commentary on this. I think there's one video I saw that was like, oh, like somebody who discovered Style Savvy after playing Fashion Dreamer, which I started watching. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting, and then they just kind of explained fashion or Style Savvy. I was like, okay, well, I already know what Style Savvy is.
Oh yeah,
but like a commentary about that kind of like this, how either, you know, depending on the person and how they feel, how close or far it hits from that social media mark, right? I think that's really interesting. Like, it's an idea. Unfortunately, I did not prepare any more further questions regarding this topic. I stumbled into this. So okay. I think that might be the end of this process. I could talk about
Fashion Dreamer like forever, because like honestly, Fashion Dreamer versus Style Savvy, like it's been a minute since I've played Style Savvy, but like I liked where Fashion Dreamer was trying to go. Like, I could see the vision. I just feel like they were trying to get really far away from Style Savvy, but I'm like, no, embrace Style Savvy, because like these were a lot of good qualities that this game had. I mean, maybe it's an expense thing. Maybe they were trying to cut costs, because I feel like Style Savvy as a whole, with all the interactions and like the different scenes and like just all the things that were going on in the game, it was probably very expensive to make. So they were like, we can't do this again. Like, I don't know who did this, but we can't do this again.
I always wonder about the company who made that. Like, they also do arcade games and stuff, and I wonder, like,
Oh,
I've
cool.
never seen the business expenses for them. I'm curious, like, what makes them more money at the end of the day, because anytime, like, arcades in Japan right now are basically live service games, so that constant money
Ah,
put, man, you keep putting the money in to, like, get all the
yeah.
money from the girls so they can dress up their characters and stuff, and
Yeah,
that
that
kind of
would.
thing. So
I'm sure that was a driving point because and oddly enough, Fashion Dreamers still releases updates to this day, which I think
yeah,
is highly interesting. Because I'm just like, I mean, I'm glad they're free. Trust,
yeah, yeah.
it's very rare to see a company like release free things, but their stuff is all just like it's not content based, but it's all like clothing and hairstyle based. It's not gameplay
Mhm.
based. So I think that's interesting. I wonder if they're working on anything else. I'm actually curious, like a sequel or maybe I don't know. It'd be cool to see if they had a sequel.
Well, if you're interested in Pretty Rhythm and you're going to Japan, you can play some Pretty Rhythm in Japan if you
Oh heck
want.
yeah!
So
I say Japan is highly high on my list of places I want to travel, so I will definitely
yeah,
check that out.
I know this is like not about our topic today, really, but pretty like they have a new one that's like aimed at like even younger girls now. So the current
Ah,
ones are aimed at basically like if you go to Japan, if you're like it depends on where you're at, right? So you go into like Akihabara, like the big otaku place, and it's a bunch of salarymen playing Pretty Rhythm, right? And then if you go to like Namco Arcade in the middle of some random town, it's like a bunch of kids there basically is what it is. So I think that like divides really
ah.
interesting. But when I was playing Aikatsu, I sat down and like just was playing on my own and then like looked over like 10 minutes later and it's all like 4 to 5 year old girls and their mom over there.
Oh, that's so
so,
sweet.
so I'm like sitting there like at the time 29-year-old man be like
I was gonna say I'd probably be over there with them. I'm not even gonna hold you.
yeah.
I love
Um
that.
last time when we talked, and this is kind of why I'm here today, and why I'm kind of distracting us, and like part of me is like maybe we should just keep talking about style side in fashion dreamer, but also I am maybe I think more interested in this topic in general.
Yeah, let's go for
After we
it.
stopped recording last time, you talked to me about Bratz,
Yes.
and in that moment, I had a very big thought, big brain thought, big
Yes.
brain
Big
boy brain
brain.
thought. I was just like, God, I've never thought about what a Bratz game is. And like you see the box art, right? And you're like, what? Like, I guess like when you see licensed content in particular, right? You're like, okay,
Yeah.
this isn't for me. That's if you want to be the most generous to how people react to it, obviously people will react to it in more extreme ways, make fun of it. They post joke reviews and stuff like that. They're like, I'm not here to really give a game a try. I'm just here to have a fun time. Be like, I'm a 30-year-old man playing a Bratz game, which thankfully I grew out of that a long time ago, even well before our last podcast. But it just made me think of like, oh, I have not even thought about these things yet. And it was kind of a weird thing because I do like dolls a lot, right?
Mhm.
For context for me, just as a reminder, like, so, I grew up, being a boy. And I liked Polly Pocket at one point, but
Heck yeah.
more or less, whether anybody directly kind of beat that stuff out of me, right, is a whole other thing. But like, I think the society thing of like you're a dude and like we're going to shame you for liking these feminine things, right? And so even though I liked Polly Pocket as a kid, it was kind of ejected from my life early on, whether it be, I don't know if it was myself who ejected it or something else. And then that kind of, followed through the rest of the years. And it wasn't until I was in my 20s that I really kind of reconciled with that. I was like, I like these things. These are cute. I'm okay with that. It doesn't matter if I'm a guy or not. But what that does mean is I don't really have any personal experience of what it means to kind of grow up with dolls as like a main focus. And my impression is from you is that that is something that you did have a childhood experience with, right?
Yes.
So I just want to know a little bit about your, childhood experience with dolls, what types of dolls you did, and or you did you. It sounds like I'm saying what kind of drugs you did. You did the
Right?
Did you roll up some Bratz and sniff it?
It's the pixie dust.
um, but like what? Yeah, I think that's enough of a question. Maybe.
No, for sure. Honestly, I grew up with a very stereotypical girly experience. This is probably why this is a lot of what I talk about on my channel. Not necessarily being like dolls on my channel, but I did grow up I literally, any Barbie anything I could get my hands on, I would buy, like, or ask my mom for. Like, I had traditional Barbies. I still have my Barbie dream house. Like, it's just giant dream house that I would play with, and it would make like sounds and like stuff like that. I had a Barbie train I was obsessed with. Let's see. I had a Bratz doll, but like my parents thought they were too grown up. So like
Yeah.
I didn't really like get to play with them that much. But I think the difference between like there's a very stark difference between like Bratz girls and Barbie girls that we could totally talk about, because that is a whole
Absolutely,
thing.
we will talk about it.
Yes,
Yes,
that's a whole sector of like talking in and of itself. But I think like growing up,
Barbie was your primary focus
I would
early
say
on,
I
though,
was
it
a
sounds like.
Barbie girl, like stereotypically now.
Yeah.
But so with the like games, when Barbie games would come out, instantly I would grab like Barbie Sports, Barbie, let's see, all the Barbie horse games, Barbie
What
Mystery
platform?
Adventure,
Uh,
PC and PlayStation 2, and game.
Okay,
Like,
so
there was
like
a GameCube one too.
okay, so like that like late '90s, early 2000s era of
Yes.
Barbie games. Yeah. Okay.
There's those, and then I'm trying to think of. I mean, honestly, Barbie kind of fell off. Like, I reviewed the last Barbie game that came out. That's on my channel too, and it was really rough. But that game is actually, it was ported from being a phone game to a Switch game, and they literally changed like nothing other than they just took out a bunch of content and charged $40 for it, which was absolutely wild. And I was just, oh my god, that game hurt my soul, because it was devoid of everything that made a Barbie game great for like triple the price tag. It was insane. But apparently they're actually coming out with a new Barbie game. I think it's like Barbie Friendship something. It's like they literally only like did like release like a title. So like when more information comes, I'm definitely gonna do a video about it. But I think for me, I did. So the thing is, I played all the Bratz games. Didn't have Bratz dolls, but I played all the Bratz games.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So
well, can I ask a question about Barbie real quick? So with Barbie,
Yeah.
did you ever fall out of Barbie? Well, like what was that whole experience for you life-wise? Because we're talking about modern Barbie stuff, and then you talked about having Barbie into like maybe the early 2000s, or at least games, right? So like what was your interest level in Barbie when?
I stopped just buying the dolls, but I would still watch the movies and play the games. I think that was really like the dolls were the only thing that kind of left.
But the consistent interest in Barbie your whole life, basically, it sounds like. Okay, cool. And then so for Bratz specifically, you never had the dolls specifically, it sounds like.
Right.
Is that right?
It was more like the games, yeah.
Okay.
I think I had like one styling head that I thought was kind of cool. I mean, honestly, Bratz had really good merch. I think the thing with Bratz was they were better at merchandising some of their products than Barbie. I mean, and I feel like Bratz stuff was like more marketable. Like Barbie stuff was like, you want to be in a castle, you want to be like in a big house, you want to be like doing all these things, like, and Bratz was like, hey, you like makeup, you like fashion, you like dancing, we got stuff for you. Barbie was more like, this is who you are. Bratz was like, this is what you wear. Like, that's the big, so whichever girls like gravitated towards. I mean, I liked the whole world building that Barbie did. I don't know, I'm just like really into world building for some reason. That kind of translates, but like Bratz was like more on just who you are, and that's really it.
Well, yeah, I played a Barbie game, I don't know how long ago, sometime within the last year. Let's say that. It's close enough. I'm old enough where that doesn't matter anymore. It's like at some point I did it. It's Barbie and the Three Musketeers specifically. But the thing I didn't like the game that much, and it's perfectly fine. I don't want to get into like the specifics of it really, but I think the thing that the feedback I got when I was talking about it was this idea that like Barbie is not so much about fashion when it comes to the movies and things like fashion's a part of Barbie, right? But it's I'm trying to remember what they said exactly. Hopefully I'm not butchering it, but I think it has to be more about pretending to be someone else in some ways. Does that make sense? Or maybe not so much pretending to be somebody else, but fitting yourself into a specific life role, which in some ways I think makes sense when you think about like the Barbies with different jobs. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, Barbie is more, I would say more like developmental. Like they made Barbie so girls could figure out kind of like who they wanted to be. I think like
Mm.
without like overly marketing, it was like, hey, Barbie, it's your personality test. Like it's not like that. It's just like,
Yeah.
can you see yourself in this Barbie doll doing what this Barbie doll is doing? I think that's
Yeah. Yeah.
mainly what, and I mean, I guess technically that's the subjection of like all dolls. Like I think all dolls kind of like have that sort of. I just feel like
Almost
Barbie
like a
screamed
reflection
about
of
it
yourself out of it a little bit, if that makes
yeah,
sense.
like yeah, I think it's weird. Like I think most dolls do that, but I think Barbie just talked about it the most. Even with the Barbie
Yeah.
movie, it was just like kind of like, oh, who is like the girl? Like I don't know if you saw the Barbie movie, but like
I did
it was
not actually
basically,
know.
oh no, it's
I
okay,
don't
it's
watch
totally
movies
fine.
really, so I would much sooner
No.
watch like one of the home DVD movies probably than the one that came out in theaters. But that's just me. So
No, I was about to say that's honestly like I'm not even like that was more or less like most people either didn't see it, rage didn't see it because I'm pretty sure like it was like an indifference thing to you. Like you weren't like, oh my god, why is there a Barbie movie? And da da da.
no,
Because there were a lot
I
of
don't
people like
watch
that.
movies like ever. So yeah, it's so rare for me to watch movies. I'm too like brain broken, and I'm like, I could watch the movie, but what if I played the video game? And I'll go play like
Yeah.
random licensed games that like I have no business playing. And I'm just like, yeah, I've never seen The Wizard of Oz, but I will play this Wizard of Oz video game. So
Game. I will play the game. Oh yeah. That's like honestly, that was me with Funko Pops. Like I was like, I have no idea what this movie is, this IP is, but like this pop is so cool. I need this pop.
So when you're playing Barbie games, like what were you specifically looking for in those games usually? Like what do you think was the things that drew you to them and what you enjoyed most about them?
See, and that's the thing, they were all so different. Like there was no real common theme. Like all of them were like their own like the Barbie mystery one was like she was literally going out and solving a mystery. Like I thought that was so cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's like Barbie going out like interrogating people, like going through the secret tunnels, like trying to get with
Uh-huh.
trying to get Ken to help her solve the mystery. But then like
Mhm.
Barbie sports, it was like she was snowboarding and skiing, and I thought that was super freaking cool. Like there was a Barbie gymnastics one where you would plan out her little routines. And like, I mean, at the time I
Mhm.
was really into gymnastics. So I would say that was probably the only one that I was like, oh, Barbie's doing a thing I like to do. I will buy this.
Mhm.
Most of it was like, it's Barbie. I'm gonna buy it. I'm not even gonna hold you.
Maybe a different way to phrase that is like, in some ways, I think it's really cool that Barbie can fit in so many different games. And I think part of that is because, what we talked about earlier, where it's like Barbie kind of adapts to you in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Um, but do you think Barbie herself adds anything to those experiences? Like when you take a gymnastic game and you put Barbie in it. Well, in some ways, there's not that many gymnastic games in general. Let's focus on the mystery game. When you take a mystery game and
Yeah.
put Barbie into it, the gymnastic thing we'll get back to. I do have thoughts on that, but the mystery game specifically, like, what do you think Barbie adds to that experience? Do you think?
Um, honestly, she wasn't really talking a lot in the game, so like I can't really say it was her talking, but like the colors were really cool. And the thing is, like, I got scared very easily throughout my childhood. So it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like the fact that it wasn't a scary experience. Like they had like scary parts. Like I'd be like, oh my
Yeah,
god,
yeah.
I don't know what's around this corner. But like it wasn't a scary game. Like if I had picked up another mystery game, like a lot of them have like spooky music or like jump scares or like things like that. It was very like
Mm-hmm.
chill experience. Like it was cozy. We'll just put that, it was cozy.
But it does like a mystery game. Typically, when you think about it, it would typically have more intense atmosphere. So it sounds like maybe Barbie relieves that a little bit, right? Does
Yeah,
that make sense?
she was a comfort
Like,
character, I guess. I would call it that.
yeah,
She was a comfort character.
yeah. Well, I think to some extent, like a character will always like if you're interested in a character, will draw you into different experiences and things like that, right?
Yeah,
And so like just applying that character to a different scenario. I mean, it's part of the reason like I like Final Fantasy, right? Is that like Final Fantasy
right.
has these kind of core tenets, and then they get applied to all these different types of games and different types of worlds and things like that. But Final Fantasy is kind of a core part of that. But with Barbie, it's kind of nice. Even like Barbie's kind of more dynamic than Final Fantasy, where we can go outside the typical genres. Well, Final Fantasy does too, but people don't appreciate it as much. Let me not get into that.
Yeah, no.
But if we don't want to talk about like 2000s offline Final Fantasy shooters and stuff, but I think that's like what I see in Barbie when I look at it from the outside. It's like, hey, here's a bunch of different experiences, and they get like kind of tied together by kind of these core set of appeals, right? Um, and I think that's the thing I have challenge with personally appreciating, maybe because I don't have a lot of context for the individual appeals of Barbie sometimes. But if I were to say it from the
Yeah.
outside, that's what it looks like to me. If that makes
I
sense.
mean, Barbie, she like, I guess the cool part was she could be anything. Like, I feel like
Yeah.
you could really put yourself in that she could be anything. Like, I don't know, Barbie game.
Mhm.
Barbie's very positive, very like, oh, like, I mean, this may be like the hardest. I mean, she's a doctor. Like, especially if people watch the movies, like, oh, she can be a doctor in the daytime, and then she can go hang out with her boyfriend and her friends, and then she can go to the mall, and like she can just do all of these things like
Yeah.
so effortlessly. And you're like, hey, maybe one day when I'm an adult, I can do all these things. Girl, my expectations of life because of Barbie, we can fight. Like,
That's one thing I did find is I don't know, but the impression I get is that the Barbie movies are bigger than you'd expect as a part of the Barbie franchise. Like, as somebody who
oh
mostly
yeah,
sees them as dolls, the Barbie movies do seem very important in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of them. So
yes,
they're being created for a good reason. They generate
yes.
revenue, I'm sure.
I was about
But
to say to
it's
sell toys. Honestly, that's why they were created, and it worked on
and I
me.
guess there's
It
that
worked on
connection too.
myself.
I don't think I necessarily thought about that connection too, but yeah, they're all interconnected, right? If you watch Barbie and the Three Musketeers, buy the video game, buy the toys, buy the movie, the holy trinity of give us your money.
And I feel really bad. It's like as a kid, like I didn't think like that. I was like, oh my gosh, like I saw the Barbie movie, and like we could get the dolls, and we could get the horse carriage, and we could get like they could all play together. I was marketed too. I was taking advantage of
Does
I
that
wanted
bother
all
you
the things.
today? Does that bother you, or do you think
Honestly,
as a kid is perfectly fine?
I mean, as a kid, like you're not expecting the
You're
world
not
to
thinking about
be
it yet.
like that. Like you're not thinking about that.
Yeah.
Like if like looking
But in
back
hindsight, I
now,
guess what I'm asking, yeah.
yeah, in hindsight, it's really bad because like especially when I would work in like toy sections and stuff. Like when I would see kids be like, "Mom, I need you to spend like $80." No, the worst one, it was like $110 for this like little magic potion thing where you would like swirl it around and a plushie popped up. It's $110. I would fight my kid in the street if they wanted that. Like I cannot imagine like wanting like a 5-second experience. Like at least with the Barbie townhouses, like I know they were probably that much, but I've got a lot to play out of those things. Like the thing is, Barbie had solid toys, things that I would play with for hours and hours and hours, and like these kids now they don't really have an attention span to play with something like for that long to get that much use out of it. So like I would say the sunk cost principle was way better when I was a kid as opposed to like
Yeah.
now when I see kids buying these things. So like I feel like marketing to kids now is a lot more almost more nefarious. Like it's
Yeah.
not the same like I mean, yeah, we made a movie. It's got Barbie. We made toys.
Yeah.
There's Barbie toys. It makes sense. But now it's just like, I mean, everything is an ad. Like if you open the Barbie game, there's like 9,000 ads popping up, like trying to sell you all these things. When I played Barbie games back in the day, you were just playing a Barbie game. Like you were watching a Barbie movie. Like it wasn't as just gross as it is now, if that makes sense.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I think a lot of games, I think people feel that way now because so much more monetization has become more and more a part of games, right? Like
Yeah.
the money is put in front of you in that experience. And like it sounds like Barbie's maybe not doing microtransactions on you, but it is saying like, hey kids, there's figures in the store. There's dolls related
There's
to
this
this. You
toys
can
over
now.
there.
I might ask you an example for that later because I'd be curious to see like visually what it looks like. But we don't need to talk about that during the show. But I might ask you about that just for my personal interest. So we talked about kind of Barbie being adaptable and things like that. So my impression with Bratz specifically is that Bratz is a little bit more rigid. Bratz seems to represent something very specific to me. Would that be accurate, do you think?
Yeah, I would say Bratz are more like this is who you want to be. Like we are the it girls. Like you want our clothes, you want our makeup, you want our shoes. Like I would say I would say like Barbie is like, hey, we have this cool universe and these cool toys. It's here if you want it. Bratz is like, you need this. Like if you want to be that girl, you need to be like buying these toys and buying these things and
Yeah.
like playing these games. I think it was definitely more direct as advertising. And like I didn't even get into like the websites because Barbie and Bratz had like their own full websites with free games and stuff like that, which I was
Yeah.
very much into when I was a kid. And I think Bratz, I was in all that, every sector. I was in all that. But Bratz, I think their
Web games in general is its own special thing. Yeah.
Oh yeah, web games,
So,
they were like, I mean, it also spilled into like, I mean, there were more simple like Flash games, but again, Barbie was a babysitter,
Yeah.
Barbie was a figure skater, Barbie was doing all the things. It was great. Bratz,
Yeah.
it wasn't really, it was more like focused on, I guess, what they were doing at the time, like, oh, the Bratz are going to the mall, or oh, the Bratz are going roller skating, or they're going to do a thing. Like, it wasn't like, I don't know, there wasn't a lot of depth. There we go, depth. They weren't deep. Which is like not in like a shot like, and I feel bad because I'm not saying Bratz girls or girls like Bratz are shallow. It's just like it seemed like what Bratz represented was more shallow. Like it wasn't really getting to the heart of like who they were. Like if you looked at Jasmine, okay, her like bio, like Jasmine was one of them. Like her little bio would be like, oh yeah, she likes to go to the mall. She wants to hang out with her boyfriend, and she's got like a dog. Yeah. She goes to school, and it's not like
she's got a dog.
Like her aspirations. It's
like the key personality trait has dog.
Dog. I'm like, it was just not. There was a lot going on to it. Like I don't know. I was a very deep child. I wanted depth. I wanted.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier is Bratz no longer? I don't feel like I see Bratz anymore. Right? I know there's a Bratz game, but it's like Bratz no longer the powerhouse it used to be.
As a girl, it's still very prevalent. Like companies still like push Bratz. Like
okay.
Well, I guess now it's more like they push Bratz themed things. I would say the Bratz like universe isn't like thriving like it used to. Like they released the game, but it's like you want to dress like Bratz. That's where kind of I mean I have that backlog of knowledge that you obviously don't have. So like you don't get marketed.
Yeah.
Hey, check out these new Bratz fashion line that you can buy yourself. And it's just like I have that in my head, like because I've seen like multiple clothing companies come out with like Bratz fashion lines, and I'm just like, first of all, I don't want to wear this. This is like the most impractical, skimpy, like this nylon, like horrible textured, like who's wearing this? First of all, who's wearing this? I mean, it's basically like club wear, but like not even good club wear. Like I wish I don't have any examples, but it's like it's weird because like I feel like they don't even market to like kids anymore. They've just fully gone after their old audience, like people like me, like my age now.
So like they're nostalgia marketing now these days, it sounds like.
Yeah.
So
yes.
Do you said that, I guess maybe the question at that point is there a kid audience still, or is it just that audience, that the previous Bratz audience, do you think?
I think there might be kids. There might have been kids who bought the game, but I really think they're nostalgia fishing at this point. It's like 1,000%.
Gotcha. So targeting their past audiences, it sounds like, basically. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, which is
and in some ways it's almost like, so to get back what we were talking about way earlier with like, body expectations, obviously Barbie has a part to play in this as well with like her body proportions and things. But to me, Bratz always kind of read a little bit more explicit of just like, hey, check out these sexy kind of outfits, but then also the characters age-wise probably a little questionable, and then also they're marketed to a very specific age. Like what I guess first and foremost, like what are your gut feelings on that thing, like as a kid and then also as an adult today? What do you think about it?
I'd say Bratz were like the Victoria's Secret angels. Like we had no business going over there, but like we saw they were pretty and cool, and like we wanted to be that like eventually, but it just, I think that's also why my parents didn't want me to like, look like idolize that. Like those mini skirts and like all those things were like so short, and like mostly they talked about boys, and I'm like, as an 8-year-old, I mean, you're not supposed to be thinking about boys. Like that's weird. Like it's just like,
so you agree with their decision, it sounds like.
Oh yeah, 1,000%. As a kid, I was like, I want a Bratz doll, and I want it now, and why can't I have it? Like I didn't understand it. Like I was a kid, like I didn't get it, but like I would say that it was definitely more, they're really mature. And it's like, and that's a problem with society, like kids growing up too fast in general. So like, and I think that was a moving point into like, look at these things that these girls care about. You should care about them. I liked Barbie because it was like, you should care about your future. Bratz was like, you need to be caring about what Brian is about to text you in like 10 minutes. It's just like, I'm like 9. Like, why do I care about what Brian has to say? Like, what?
Do you know why you wanted one as a kid when you mentioned it earlier? Is it just more of a...
cool.
Okay.
They just really look cool. I mean, their clothes were cool.
Yeah.
Like, visually, they were visually appealing. Like, honestly, their style was kind of like almost reminded me of anime in a way. Like the way their eyes and their like their proportions are. They're definitely more
large
on an anime
eyes
style.
and stuff,
So I think I like the style of it. I wasn't really looking at like what they represented in a whole as a whole.
Yeah. When I ask the kid question, it's definitely not so much like, oh, what was your like deep thoughts on this back then? But like, kind of just like the impulse that would get you to go. Because sometimes that impulse can be the design. It can be, you know, social pressures, things like that, right? So I think there's a lot of reasons why people like get driven to get engaged with something, right? Whether it be personal interest or, you know, in my case, driven away for social reasons, right? That kind of stuff. So I think that's interesting. So between... is there anything we've talked most about Barbie and Bratz? Is there any other doll brands that you liked, like off the top of your head? Not that like we need to talk super deep about them, but is there anything else that you really enjoyed?
I think like Littlest Pet Shop, I kind of got into them. They were really cute. I like the little doggies and cats and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think doll wise. I never got into Monster High dolls. I thought a lot of them was weird. Like, I like the Ever After dolls.
Gen 1 looks good. Everything afterwards not good. So yeah,
it's a definite quality thing because, like, I remember, like, I watched them do a deep dive on their like the progression of how they were, and like Gen 1, they were like it was real jeans and real leather and like all this stuff, and then everything else after that was fake, and I was just like, dang, that's disappointing. And I feel like Barbie probably went down that route. I don't think Barbie really focused on like quality of clothes either. Like, I mean, I had some like satin-ish dresses, but they weren't real satin. Barbie wasn't like about that. Like, I'm pretty sure Barbie didn't do all of that.
So it sounds like Bratz and Barbie are probably, if I were to ask you your favorite, it's probably between one of those two, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like.
Yeah.
And it sounds like maybe Barbie's your favorite.
I think Barbie might be my favorite.
Okay.
I mean, Bratz did have really
most
good
positively
games
about
too.
Barbie, so we'll get to the games. That's like, definitely, we still got games to talk about. More about the dolls specifically. It sounds like maybe surface level Bratz looked nice, but they didn't really do what. Admittedly, you had kind of like a outside pressure from your parents not to engage with it, but it sounds like at the end of the day, you respected Barbie more anyways at the baseline, right?
I think also, now that I'm thinking back, I'm just like, I feel like Barbie leaned more into the pastels and Bratz didn't. So like, that's also another thing. Like there were a couple of pastel-ish Bratz dolls, but definitely not as much as like Barbie. Like Barbie is mostly pastels. Like Bratz is definitely a darker color palette. And I like bright colors.
What years were Bratz most relevant? Yeah. What years do you remember when they were to kids? Because like I'd imagine it reflects the fashion of the time.
Yeah, I would say early 2000s. I would say that's pretty much was the big Bratz boom.
I feel like 2000 specifically, like a lot of color palettes for fashion kind of darkened more. I think you had more of that kind of darker look. I say. Not really knowing, but if I were to like remember.
No. I would say that's pretty accurate. And it's like this color palette wasn't really popular. Most girls were like, I don't like pink. So they didn't really market that kind of stuff. So I would say that's pretty accurate. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about Barbie games already. Bratz games.
Yes.
I still today have not played a Bratz game, despite you encouraging me to do so.
Oh my gosh, you have
I'm so slow moving with this stuff. I played a Monster High game recently. We don't need to talk about it. I may reference it.
No, I'm curious. Was it
Let's
good?
talk about Bratz first, and we can get. My feelings were not great about it. I
Oh
am very generous to
no.
games, so there's a lot of things that like got me really excited about it when I first looked at it, and then when I started playing it, I was like, kind of thing.
Aw.
But I think that's kind of part of why I want to talk to you about Bratz to some extent, is because like it could be that I'm not looking at it from the right angle, right? And obviously, you haven't played Monster High or anything like that, or it sounds like you haven't. But like I think there may be some value I get out of like how you look at Bratz and like what the values get in Bratz games and things like that. So like how many Bratz games? I don't know how much of an expert you are in Bratz games. How many Bratz
Oh
games
yeah.
generally are there, and like how many have you engaged with personally?
I think there's at least 7. I played like half of them. Like honestly, like I was
Okay,
really into their games. Their games were pretty
yeah,
good.
yeah. So in most of those games, because I believe they go back as far as at least the GameCube and PS2 era, early 2000s, right? And then I think there was
Yeah.
a recent release a year or
Yes.
two ago. Is that right?
That
So
was about
so they've been
2
sticking
years ago.
around.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was there a really
They've
big
definitely
gap
kept their.
between those, or?
Oh yeah, it was a huge gap. Like I would say,
Mm,
at least 9 years. There was at least almost probably 10 years. It's been a big. Like the Bratz game was a long time coming. Like I was actually genuinely very excited about it. I reviewed it on my TikTok.
yeah.
And it was one of those. It didn't do well. It didn't do well, and it wasn't made well. I'm pretty sure the studio that made the Bratz game
Mm,
didn't make the other games. I would say I could say that pretty confidently.
gotcha. Yeah. I might know the person who did writing on it. I've seen it in like a Bratz game in his profile. I think before that he
Ah.
did some writing for the dialogue and stuff.
Oh
So be careful what they
no.
say. I don't know if he'd actually listen to the show or not. So
Well, no, the writing. It wasn't the writing. It was the graphics.
yeah,
I would say 100% that it wasn't the writing. It felt like
yeah.
the way they talked and everything. It felt like a Bratz game, but it was just the graphics,
Okay.
and I'm pretty sure he probably didn't work on that.
What? Okay. Actually, to talk about that, like, what does it mean? How do brats talk? Like, what does that look like for you? And like, what is the appeal?
um,
Is it good?
they're
Is it
very
something you like? I guess.
yeah, no, actually, you know what's funny? Like the characters themselves, when you get in universe with them, like in their movies and their games, they're very
Mhm,
I would say they're very motivated. They like whatever they're thinking about, they're very motivated about. Like, I'm going to lunch with Brian tomorrow, it's happening, like we're soulmates. I'm
mhm,
going to get to be the head of this newspaper. I don't care what it takes, like their fashion blog. We're gonna do the fashion blog. We're gonna get it going. We don't like the twins. We're
mhm,
gonna demolish them in the fashion category. Whatever they want to do, they're going to do it. Like I
mhm,
feel like
mhm.
that's a really good quality to have. Like I felt like I was appreciative of that.
I do notice that with like games for girls in general, there's like a specific, and maybe this has to do like I think like the stereotype. I'm not saying this is true. The stereotype is
Yeah.
that like boys physically can be mean, like young boys physically can be mean, but then girls are typically more mentally mean. If that makes sense. I don't know if that's a stereotype. Like I said, I'm not saying that I necessarily believe that, but if
Yeah,
like I
yeah.
can pull it out of my head as something said. But when I see writing in games for girls, a lot of things feel like they sting more.
Oh
Like
yeah. There's
it
definitely
feels
like
like
I
a
feel like
lot
a
of trash
catty.
talk and stuff.
There's
Yeah.
a very catty element to girls sometimes, and it's really interesting. And it, depending on like what game you're looking at, and like it's funny how certain games it definitely had reflected more. Like I'll say Waka Waka Sweets, like the game we were playing last time. Like they had the really catty boys, but also some of the girl
Mhm.
chefs were really catty too. Like she had no friends. Like I felt really bad for this girl. Like every time
Yeah.
she met a new chef, she was like, "Oh my god, girl, we're in a contest," and it's like, "I'm gonna beat you." You're not
Yeah.
gonna win here. And it's like, okay, I guess that's another one we can't be friends with.
We know we have all this stuff, and like from a gameplay perspective, it sounds like you don't like this game, but like from a gameplay perspective, what does it do to support those kind of story points and support that dialogue? Are you doing things that are interesting that leads into that, or is it more the dialogue's enjoyable, the game doesn't really match that?
The dialogue was pretty enjoyable. It's funny, this Bratz game came at it like I would say this Bratz game had an influencer element too. So like you're doing your
Oh, okay.
quests and you're writing your story. So like after you would do a quest, you would write a story about it, and then
Mhm.
you would get like influence and like points and stuff like that. So I liked that aspect of it. I felt like that was like a true, well-rounded like fashion kind of experience. Now, I will say you didn't get a lot of clothing options, which I thought was truly bizarre for a Bratz game. It's like literally we have a passion for fashion. I'm like, we had 7 tops. Like, what is going on here? Like, there's more than 7, but like, where's the fashion? Where's this passion coming from? It's like, and then when it came to the graphics, like, I would say they just didn't invest in it as much as I would have liked them to. A lot of it was really muddy. And like when it came to like the eyeshadow looked really muddy. So it's just like these girls, their whole thing is they want to look good and they want to look great.
Yeah.
And it's like this eyeshadow looks like somebody just took brown and just smeared it on someone's face. Like that's crazy. Like it was just wild to look at. So it's like that. Those are the things that I'm like, I feel like if you were to do a next gen fashion game, technically, because this was available on PS5 and Xbox, so it like totally didn't match up, which is like, it was really sad. I bought the game day one, $40. The game is like on sale for $20 now. It's like, and actually it went on sale, I think about 2 or 3 weeks after the game came out. I was pissed. I was freaking pissed, man. I was a day one Bratz believer. What did they do?
So we haven't talked about like the gameplay of the game much. And in some ways I wonder, like, does that mean the gameplay doesn't matter that much in this game? Is it more of the aesthetics that matter kind of thing? Or?
So the gameplay itself, honestly, there just wasn't a lot to talk about because like it was really bad. So like, the world itself was very muddy. Like when you would go out and try to do stuff, they like, okay, let's say like she has a bike, right? She would bike around, her legs barely moved when she would ride the bike. If she was roller skating, she would just be like stagnant roller skating. Like it just looked so bad. Like it felt almost unfair to critique because of how bad it was. It just like,
so, like, oh so it's more of more of a presentational thing with the gameplay. Yeah. It sounds like
1000%. Very much presentation wise is not great.
So the old games, you've played a lot of those though. Mostly PS2 and GameCube, is that right? So like what did those games do? Well, I don't know if they're similar games at all. I don't know if it's like a Barbie situation where it's like, hey, we apply these things to different genres. But like what did those games do better back then, do you think? That
you know what's funny? Like it was a 1-to-1. Like they made how the old games were. You're going to all these different spots and you're collecting these coins and you're talking to people, and like they took, I mean, the only thing I feel like that wasn't the same is they didn't have that whole influencer blog portion, but all the games were like you're going around these different spots and you're roller skating and you're doing all the same things, you're riding a bike. There was fluid movement. There was like, it was just better. Like the graphics at the time, if you line them up side by side, you almost couldn't tell which game came out first. Like that's how much of a downgrade like this game was. And it's crazy to say. So like everything about like the older games, I really thought like if they took the way the older games were and gave them next gen graphics, we would have an incredible game. Like, I was like, what happened? Y'all went backwards, like way backwards. Like, she's not moving on her roller skates. Like, I had this in GameCube. Like, what is happening?
So maybe to like to apply some context with it, to some extent then. So like, so I played Monster High recently, and Monster High Ghoul Spirit is the Wii one. I think it's the first one. And when you play it, you know, you get kind of introduced to this world, and the whole game takes place within the high school, right? And the context of that game seems to be basically you're the new girl, you showed up, you can like dress up your character. Bratz had 7 tops, Monster High has 2.
Oof.
Seems crazy to me, but it's whatever. But so the whole thing is like, okay, you're gonna meet these girls. I assume the Monster High main characters or whatever, right? And or at least, you know, some defined dolls. And then you're gonna go help them do things, basically. And it's basically like a excuse for you to go around and like talk to these different characters. You know, they're gonna be like, hey, you know, I'm hungry and you need to go get food for somebody, and you bring them, they're vampires, so you bring them meat or whatever, a bloody steak or something. And you find out she's actually a vegetarian, stuff like that, right? And like mechanically, nothing complicated is happening here. It is all just press A on somebody, go press A on the next person. So I guess, and kind of trying to describe this, like, there's a simplicity to Monster High as a game when you think about it. It is essentially Fetch Quest, the video game, right?
Oh,
And
okay, yeah,
with but I think it's the context that matters, right? And so you're
sure.
like in this school interacting with these characters, and you, as assume, like the person playing this as a Monster High fan, are going to get, the joy out of being able to directly interact with these characters, see them in 3D, in motion, stuff like that. So I guess, like, in some ways, I'm trying to look for like the context of these Bratz games, where
Yeah.
it's like, okay, so what is, because this is a high school setting for Monster High, and like here's kind of like what you're doing, and I think I don't really know like what is the Bratz game setting like, and like what is the context of these things of biking around and collecting these coins and things like that.
Yes, let me break it down. Sorry, I can
Yeah.
definitely explain this way better. So basically, you are one of the four in the main group: Chloe, Yasmin,
Mhm.
Jade. I'm blanking on the last girl's name. Sorry. But basically, you pick whoever you want to be. You can go around to
Mhm.
these different spots. You can talk to these different characters. They'll have quests for you. You complete the
Mhm.
quests, and then once you complete them, you talk about it in your blog. Now there are different worlds. I
Mhm.
call them worlds, but they're really levels that you can go to. There's like an airport. There's a movie theater kind of stage situation. That one
Yeah,
is kind of
yeah.
weird, but there's just different places where you go and you can complete more of these quests. Some of them have the biking and the roller skating,
Mhm.
surfing. Let's see. Oh, there's also spots where you can take photos. You have like photo opportunities, which felt very Bratz. Like that was
Yeah.
in the old games too. Let's see.
And the thing you're
So,
saying right now, do they apply to all the Bratz games so far, really? Like,
yeah,
is
I
this
would
the
say
context
they
across the
apply
board?
to,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, the old
Gotcha.
ones you would switch between all of them, and the new one you could only be one, which I thought was interesting.
Gotcha. Okay. So it is basically like, in some ways it's kind of like, how we talked about earlier with like Barbie moving around to different like places. I was about to say time space, different places in time and space and fantasies. But in the
Yes.
case of Bratz, it's more about these real life things and kind of shuffling you between like a mall environment. Like, what does it mean to be a teenage girl in like a mall environment, right? And obviously, it's not going to be
Exactly.
necessarily accurate because you may not bike around and collect coins in a mall or
Right.
something like that, right? But these different areas give you different contexts as for like, if you did you say a stage show at one point or something like that,
Yeah,
or a
so
stage? Yeah.
that one you're trying to find background dancers for
Hmm.
this one stage production, and then you end up not being able to find them. Like, you have to go out and go back to other
Hmm.
worlds and try to talk to people. You end up not being able to do that. You go back and you do it yourself, which I thought
Yeah,
was kind of
gotcha.
funny.
So how do you think that like all these pieces kind of come together to make? Because like, you mentioned to me like the Bratz games are good. Is that an accurate statement by
Yeah.
you
Hmm.
generally? Except for the new one,
Yeah.
you don't like the new one as
Except
much.
yeah, except for the new
Yeah.
one.
But like how do you think you would put that like into the context of like, hey, this is an interesting game, and like try to message that to like somebody? Like, how do you communicate the appeal of that to somebody, if that makes sense?
I would say these games are kind of like a traditional girly experience where you would like
Hmm.
go to the mall and go to all these different settings as uh just like you're just hanging out as a typical girl going to these different spaces and completing quests. Like, I think it's like it's kind of this experience of like, if you weren't the popular girl in school, like, I mean, you
Hmm.
probably didn't have these experiences like, oh, you have a friend group and they're really solid and they're really supportive and you're just going out and hanging out and doing all these
Hmm.
things and chasing your dreams. Like, if you didn't have that growing up, like, oh, why not just go do these girls, like, fake like
Yeah.
you're doing these girls with these girls. Yeah.
In some ways, I guess we've talked about Mary Kate and Ashley games before, and
Yes.
is part of that. Do you think, because you mentioned the fact like if you're not the popular girl in school, this kind of gives you that experience? Is like Mary Kate and Ashley to some extent like kind of like being the experience of being Mary Kate and Ashley? I don't really know how those games are structured, but is that like a similar thing there? Or?
I feel like it's funny because it didn't really focus as that on them as being popular. It just focused on them being girls. So like for
Okay.
them, they had the mystery mall experience where, oh, you worked in a pizza shop to serve these pizzas guests or to guests pizza before the time runs out, and oh, you're in the snowboarding shop and you got to snowboard down this hill, which by the way was so funny. Like you have go into a store and you're going down a slope, like it transforms into a snowboarding space. Like what? That's so cool. But but you weren't exactly Mary Kate and Ashley. You were two girls going to the mall to do. Well, first it started off, you were just going to the mall just to hang out, and then it's a mystery magical mall. So you're doing all these things in this magical mall. But it wasn't like that. Yeah. Like, if that makes sense. Yeah. Same with their other games, too. It's like, you're just, like, their horse one was really good. Oh my god, their horse one, that was the best one that they did. But you're basically just hanging out with both of them, and you're doing this horse quest, and that was a really fun one.
One thing I'm thinking about right now, and I don't know if this is just like an oversimplification, but, you know, we talked about with Barbie, you know, this kind of the role model thing. And then Bratz, it's kind of like, you know, you being with the popular girls, essentially, right? And, you know, I think to some extent, video games, there's always an aspect of me in video games, right? When I play a World War II shooter versus like watch a movie, I ran through the trenches and shot bullets versus the movie. You're not going to go watch a World War II movie and say, I ran through the trenches and shot. So there's always this aspect of you in most games. I'm sure there's some exceptions. And there's some games that kind of play with that idea. Like there's a game called Baten Kaitos on the GameCube. It's a Japanese RPG. And like a big gimmick of this game is that you are not any of the characters. You are a spirit who watches over them, and they're aware of you, and they will sometimes deceive you because there are times you don't see them, right? And so these things are happening versus like, you know, games where they are going to like fade away to another cutscene where it's like, oh, look, he might actually be evil. Like they don't want you to see that because you're a real thing in that world, right? And I wonder, like, does it feel like you as a player are more important in these games versus other games that come out? I don't know if this is actually true, if it emphasizes your feeling of being in that role versus, you know, a game like a God of War or something like that where you're kind of following these other characters that are doing things.
Yeah, I would say like because like, okay, specifically to God of War, like I would watch like people like my dad and like people I've dated play those games. I don't play those games, but I feel like
I don't know why I said God of War. I don't even like God of War. I've never played a God of War game, but we have the example there, so there you go.
It's funny because like I've watched every single one be played almost in their totality, so like I know a lot about God of War and I've never played it. So like actually that's a great example and I'm glad you picked it. But I feel like Kratos has such a large personality. Like you are playing as Kratos. Like you're not Kratos. There is no, like, you don't feel like you're Kratos, like, when you're playing. Like, I would just take the controller and play for a little bit. I sucked at those games. But, like, his personality is so large and in charge, and he's just saying things, and you're like, whoa, I would never say something like that. I would never do something like that. Like, you can't relate to him at all. Like, I mean, I'm sure there might be some macho 300-pound buff guy that might be able to relate to some of this stuff, but, like, I feel like you couldn't really relate to being Kratos. Like, I feel like the Barbie and the Bratz games, like, you could see yourself, you know, hanging out at the mall. You could see yourself, I mean, maybe you technically can't see yourself going on a magical adventure with a magical pony, but, like, one can dream that I'm doing this. But I just feel like, right? I just feel like there's, like, a level of, like, especially Barbie, I feel like she kind of mutes her personality enough where you can kind of slip in there and, like, feel it a little bit more, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And like kind of in a lot of ways, like the less a character talks, the more you can kind of, or less defined a character is, the more you can kind of slip into their shoes without too much trouble, kind of thing. So we talked a lot about like the more recent Barbie, or did you like the more recent Barbie game or not? I don't remember.
No, I was like, no, just because it was a mobile game, basically.
That's right. Okay, I remember now. So you have these old games, Barbie games, you like them. You have these old Bratz games, you like them. And it sounds like, unfortunately, there's a dark period right now when it comes to doll games.
Yeah.
What do you think you'd like to see going forward? Like, what would make those Barbie games of the future and the Bratz games of the future, maybe not even those specific properties, but games that have the similar values, what would you like to see in the future? Or are there things that you feel like are replacing those kind of games today?
I think like honestly, a lack of structure in the game itself is kind of like, it's kind of hindering them. Like these games are not even a lack of structure. I feel like it's just like features. Like they're just missing a lot of the features that like the older games tend to do a lot more.
Mhm.
Like I'll say like Waka Waka Sweets had like a nice amount of outfits that you could like get and then earn as well. It felt very earned whenever something came out, like or you got a new thing or something like that. With Fashion Dreamer, you would just go like mostly you would just go into this room and just click on stuff and then now you have this outfit, now you have this
Mm.
item, and it's just like it's really boring. Like that's really boring. Like with Sao Sabi, you were going on you were doing this quest and doing these interactions and trying to build up
Mhm.
these points and things like that. um and I feel like there's just like a level of like interacting with the game itself that is kind of missing. Now on my channel, actually, I just posted like in terms of IPs. There's a new Totally Spies game that got announced that is going to come out. They said before 2024 is over. I'm not sure exactly
Oh,
when.
nice.
Yes, but I'm really excited because like Totally Spies, they were a very fashion heavy IP. So like all the characters,
Yeah.
like that was one of the shows where all the game characters would switch outfits, which was unheard of at the time. Like they
You
had the
ever
budget
play
for that.
Totally Spies Totally Party on the Wii or the
No, but
PS2 as well?
I remember I remember it came out and it's weird. Like there are some games that came out on the Wii and like PlayStation 2 where I'm like, how did I not get that? But I think it's because I literally asked for so many
If you
games.
check it out, probably play the PS2 version because the motion controls are weird. But I like that game
Ah,
a lot, and you get to choose your outfit before each board. It's basically a Mario Party kind of game,
oh,
but it
I
has
love
some really
that.
unique um, cooperative elements because it's a 3-player game because there's 3 girls,
Oh, cool.
and then it has like almost like combat aspect to it because you lay bombs around the stage. And that's how you beat
Nice.
the boss, basically. So you kind of cooperate to beat the boss. Execution, whole other story, concept, very cool. So yeah,
Definitely
like
would
that,
check it
I
out.
can definitely see the fashion aspect of styles or not styles heavy. My brain's saying Spy Girls now. What's Spy
Oh,
Girls?
totally
I feel like I know something called Spy
Spy Girls.
Girls,
I bet
and I
that was a
don't know
thing.
what it is anymore. Anyways, let's throw that out. I don't know what that is. But yeah. Okay. So yeah, so it's a very fashion based franchise. Sorry, I interrupted you, but I was just kind of
Oh no, it's okay. Yeah,
emphasizing that a little bit. So yeah.
for sure.
So were you looking forward with that game? It sounds like you were kind of leading into like, is it just the fashion element? Is there
Oh
something
no,
else
so
specifically about?
it's the fashion. They're going on spy missions too. It's like very much like they're I believe they're attending school as well. I think I
Okay.
saw in some of the screenshots. Like it's very much this is the show, this is the game. So I'm really excited about that. They could do so much with that. Like it's like I'm excited.
And do you see that like the things that you mentioned earlier that you were missing, like the structure and stuff like that? Do you see that progression in it so far from what you've seen from the outside at the moment, or
Yeah, it looks like it's kind of going in that better direction. Because
yeah?
like the thing with the Bratz game is like not if I left out like the graphics and like the polish and stuff, like when it was like Bratz was very open world ish. Like
Mhm.
in the older games, like you weren't like, okay, if you go to this level and there's nothing to do, it's just there and there's
Yeah,
nothing to do. Like the older games weren't like that. Like you could go to the different levels and there was still something to do. But like I think
gotcha.
with these newer games, it's just like it's either like it's open world and you have access to all of these levels and there's nothing to do at these levels, or it's like you can click on this one level, you're in this level until it's done, and then you go to the next one, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, the thing I was trying to think about with that a little bit because like one thing that I think, I'm like 34. I turned 34 last week actually, so I'm old. Thank you.
Ooh.
Um, I grew up with a very particular type of game, right?
Mhm.
And so, the very particular structure. And then you have something like Minecraft comes out in 2008. And I'm like, my brain's just like, I'm never going to play this thing probably. But uh, come to find out, probably one of the most influential games that are going to be around or, ever to release.
Yeah.
As time goes on, you kind of realize that. And
I don't,
it seems like a game that in a lot of ways fundamentally changed what people expect out of video games. And a lot of that with younger people specifically. And a
Yeah.
lot of that I feel like imparts itself on the games being made now that specifically ones that aim to be younger as well, where it feels like it's not so much about building these structured experiences, it's about building a sandbox for somebody to do something in. Whether a game succeeds at doing that or not, it's kind of a whole other thing. Do you think it's more of a, instead of saying like, that the structure is necessarily bad, but it's a specific design decision that just doesn't like resonate with you? Or do you think it is like a fundamental problem with the type, like the Bratz games and the Barbie games, in terms of how not being compatible with that kind of structure?
I'll break it down by which game because it's like they're both so different. So like with the Barbie game, it was basically like you're in her house and each room does a different thing.
Mhm.
So you could go into like her bedroom and like you could make the lights do something, or you could put the little Barbies on the
Yeah.
DJ stand and then they would just start dancing, and it was just it's very hollow. Like I'm not gonna
I mean,
hold you like that
that's
game.
kind of cute. I like the DJ dancing Barbies on your nightstand or whatever it was.
Like, wait, like that sounds so much more positive than what this game.
I'm not saying that makes it a good game. I'm just saying that sounds kind of cute.
Oh my god, I love that. No, if it was that, I would have liked it more. For this game, it was just like, I don't know. There was like, I would say there was like a five different things you could engage with
Mhm.
in each room, and that was like it. So
Yeah.
like for the game, I wouldn't say I was looking for like a sandbox experience, but it was just, I would like the old Barbie games had like a whole world. Like you could go and
Yeah.
do different things with Barbie. This one is just like, oh, I'm in Barbie's house. That
Gotcha.
did something. This does something. Like it was just very like, whoa, what are we doing here? Like, what is happening?
I had games like that when I was a kid. There's a game called Rodney's Fun Screen, and it's just a bunch of garbage. Like as a kid, I was having a great time. I was like, yeah, I'll watch the guy like get out of bed and play his guitar when I click on his bed for some reason. But that's like the beginning and end of that experience. So like, doesn't make it a good game per se. But yeah, okay. So like, it sounds like it's like structurally, it doesn't really match with what the thing I was presenting. I feel like from what you're
Yeah.
saying, at least the Barbie one. So
Oh yeah. Well, and the other thing with the Barbie game is like you would have to put the Barbies in to do the thing. So
Mhm.
like it's basically like playing with dolls, but if you don't tell them to do anything, you're staring at a room, and then that's
Yeah,
just kind of
yeah, yeah.
it.
And then for the Bratz game, correct me if I'm wrong, that sounded like it was open world though, like and there's spaces to go, and it sounds like it aligns with what the old Bratz games were doing, but it's more about the content that's in the space. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Okay. Okay. I think I'm just like trying to find angles of which these games could be viewed in like a more positive light kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I don't
And
know if that is there not having played it. I tend to that's what I tend to try to think about, which is kind of like what I was talking about earlier with Monster High. I'm like, here, let me paint a picture of what I think is good about this game. But then like when I think about it as a video game, I'm like, man, there's nothing in this video game. And I would love to talk to the person who played Monster High Ghoul Spirit and loved it, and I really want to know what they think. I really want to know. That's
it's
every time I like don't like a game, that's like the immediate thing is like I want to find the person who likes the game and be like, tell me about what you like about this. Not because I'm like being like saying like you're wrong, but because I
yeah,
really want
it's
to
like
know
I
why
want to
I'm
dive
wrong.
into like your very positive mind about
Yeah.
this whole situation.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
and it's funny. I haven't like watched anyone who had like positive thoughts about the game because I saw so many like negative ones, but I did see one girl. She was just like, "It's Bratz. I've been waiting for Bratz, and I'm happy that
Yeah.
it's here." And I was like, "Okay, I'm happy for you. I just want more." Like I feel like that as I think that's something that as a content creator and as someone who reviews games and talks to game developers, there's a level that we just can't go back to anymore. Just like just enjoying it for what it is, and there's nothing I can do about the experience. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah, I mean, one thing that is really a weird connection I've made with this stuff, with licensed games in particular, is that like sometimes you just want to see the character you love, right?
Yeah.
and see them in new and unique situations and scenarios. And like that's also like probably the thing that drives like mobile gotcha games. Like people who play
Oh
Genshin
yeah.
Impact, they're like, I love this boy. He's my cute little. I protect him forever, and I'll spend $500 trying to pull his clothes. So right, and I feel like even though obviously Genshin Impact kind of a very different thing, and the people who it appeals to, people who pull like sexy gotcha games and stuff, like it all kind of comes back to I like this character, I want to see character, and I have a hard time resonating with that. Honestly, I don't think I feel that way with a lot of things, but I think the more and more I spend time looking at that stuff, I feel like that's more and more of it is like this feeling of like I just want to see the thing I love in different ways, in some ways, which I kind of
I
have to
think it's
respect,
sweet.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
sweet.
So, but
And
anyways,
honestly, Genshin has a whole like oh yeah, sorry, yeah, like Genshin has a whole like their kinds of fans are
mm,
very like they're very invested. Like Genshin fans
yeah,
are super invested. Like they're buying the acrylic stands and they're buying the pillows and they're buying the
mm,
art and they're buying the cosplays, amazing cosplays. Like Genshin,
yeah.
like I don't play Genshin, but like if I ever got into Genshin cosplay, I know my money is going down the toilet because the cosplays are so incredible and cool looking. And I appreciate Genshin players. Like I can never ascribe myself to buying $500 of like Genshin coins to get his specific outfit, but good for you. Good for you for caring that much.
I
That's
know,
just kind
good
of how
for
I feel.
you, but I understand why, or maybe I don't understand, but I can see why, right? Like, going back to the whole, holy trifecta of we'll take your money for Barbie things, right? Like
Yeah,
at
it's
some
the
point,
same sentiment. I feel like
yeah.
it's just they don't have dolls. Like I feel bad because like at least at the end of the day, I got a physical something out of it other than like
Yeah, that's kind of a whole other thing. I do think there is, if you're gonna waste your money on something like that, it probably is better to get something physical. At least you can hold on to it. That doesn't mean it's good for you to buy it, but um,
that's the only way I can literally justify it in my brain. Like that's why I don't really
yeah,
like to play mobile games and like the whole Animal Crossing had Pocket Camp, which I wanted to get into, but like the amount of money you have to spend to get your campsite to look how these campsites look on
yeah,
Twitter. I'm just
yeah.
frustrated because like I just don't I'm not spending that. I'll wait for Pocket Camp or
Kind
wait for Animal Crossing to get it together.
kind of getting a little bit back to the social media thing as well as like that. Once I think you start building a certain level of clout around that stuff, like
Oh
hopefully you're
yeah.
making money from it because that is going to drive you to purchase more so you can continue to, funnel that thing. So, and
Yes.
that's where getting money is important in that regard. So, um, imagine yourself, you're in a room, and in comes another gamer, Mr. Gamer. He loves Call of Duty. Call of Duty is so good. Um, you need to tell him why the Bratz games are good in a way that you think he can appreciate it. What do you think you would say to him about the Bratz games that would make him be like, I could see that?
How open minded is this person?
He loved Call of Duty.
And
That's
that's
the
it? Oh
only thing
god.
you know.
Oh,
He loved
oh
Call of
no.
Duty.
Oh gosh. Oh. It's like that's a tough
the,
sell,
the Call of
man.
Duty thing doesn't really matter. I mean, what I'm really asking is that, I think one thing, I was in a position where before, we talked, before you mentioned Bratz to me, I never considered Bratz as a video game, right?
Fair.
Um, that's not to say that I didn't know that they didn't exist, but at no point did I ever ask myself, what is a Bratz game? And, I think for most people, if they're in that situation, they will look at it through their own perspective, right? And then say, not for me. And then, like I said earlier, they kind of make their own whatever they do from there, whether that's just disengaging or actively make fun of it or whatever they do, right? And so I
Right.
guess if you have somebody on the other side of that where they are not in that space, like what do you think you can say to them that would at least convey to them what you think, convey to them your appreciation of this stuff?
For Bratz, I would say if
Or
you
Barbie,
want
whichever you
oh
prefer.
oh yeah. think both of them are trying to accomplish giving a positive experience to being a girl, because like honestly girls go through like a lot, and it's not necessarily like, it's not in some countries it's outright banned, but no, it's like being a girl isn't necessarily seen with a positive light in most regards. So it's I think with those games it really just tries to make a fun space. Is like, yes, we're gonna dress up in the clothes that we like, we're gonna go hang out in the spaces that we like, and have fun and enjoy each other's company and empower each other and engage with interests that we like. I think the Bratz and Barbies games are just a celebration of, it's trying to push a celebration of being a girl, and wanting other girls to not be in competition with each other, but like, you know, think positively of each other, and be you know, and think of each other highly, and wanting to share experiences with each other. I think like those games really want to capture that, and I like them.
I talked a few times in the podcast about this idea about, you know, me trying to look at something from a more positive perspective at times, and I don't necessarily know if that's like the right way to put it, but I think, you know, all these games have different types of appeals, and when people enjoy them, you know, I don't think it makes a lot of sense for us to say, you know, people are wrong for enjoying them, or they have some bias that makes it so they enjoy them. I think the big thing is, you know, these games have different appeals, and they're going to appeal to different people, and I would like to generally find, you know, the common language that we have to kind of like communicate this appeals between different audiences and people who are into different genres and things like that. Because I think whenever we look at something and we start having like this mass idea that people are wrong or maybe misinterpret the situation, it's pretty rare that is something that comes out of nowhere, and there's usually a reason why people feel the way they feel with this stuff. And while I obviously have sympathy for games for girls, I think Princess Poki did an amazing job kind of at the end there, summing up, you know, what she likes about these games and what she values in them. And I hope if you are into games for girls, if you made it to this whole podcast not being into games for girls, I really hope that kind of resonates with you in some extent. After this podcast, I thought more about Monster High Ghoul Spirit, and it's still not my favorite game. I would say I pretty actively don't like playing that game, but at the end of the day, I think it's a game that when I can look at it, I can kind of see what the appeal would be to somebody, and if I talk to somebody who really enjoyed it, I think I could kind of understand, you know, how they feel about it and why they feel the way they do. And I think understanding that appeal is really important to me, to making sure that, you know, I'm staying open-minded to these things and making sure that I understand kind of the design sensibilities behind these games and who they're trying to attract and things like that. Is that important? I don't know, but I like doing that. So here we are. But anyways, thank you. And yeah, maybe check out a Games for Girl yourself. Maybe. I don't know. It's up to you. You do what you do.